Hi, I'm Ian, and I've got a story to share. When I was little, the heavens blessed me with the greatest video game console ever made, the GameCube. And if you think differently, it's okay, just know that your opinion is wrong. One of the reasons the GameCube is the greatest is because of its legendary selection of games, such as Luigi's Mansion, The Wind Waker, Mario Kart Double Dash, Kirby Air Ride, and The Hobbit. Okay, maybe that last one doesn't deserve legendary status, but it still holds a special place in my heart. But there's one game that I've neglected to mention, and it's one of my favorites. What is this game? Well, some may know it as
Super Mario Sunshine! Woohoo!
2002? Jeez. Now this is an amazing game, and I'd say it still holds up today, and it's definitely worth playing. If you're not prone to outbursts of rage, this is probably the worst game to give to little Ian because I couldn't control my anger. See, my anger was like a monstrous, uncontrollable werewolf, and this game was like the full moon that triggered its rampage.
I think you're blowing things out of proportion, little Ian. I'm sure you're being overly dramatic.
You know what I'd say to that? If you ever found yourself face to face with me in my beast form, then God have mercy on your soul. And also, who are you and how'd you get in here?
I'll never tell. I still don't believe you.
Okay, well, let me tell you a story. Early one morning, I jumped out of my bed and raced down the stairs to the TV. And back in those Wild West days, it was early worm gets the bird, or whatever. I pulled out the Super Mario Sunshine disc, plopped it into the GameCube, plugged in my controller, and yeah, those were the primitive days where your controllers were shackled to the console. And I sank down in a cozy cushion, chose my save file, and began where I left off. Now my goal was to get to the Shine Sprite, which was no easy task. I had to cross a sand bridge of doom overlooking an endless pit of darkness. Sounds intimidating, because it was.
So what? Just cross the bridge, Bilbo Baggins.
First off, I'm not Bilbo. Second, it wasn't that easy. As soon as you step onto the sand bridge, it begins to dissolve like an ice cube in a steaming bowl of chicken noodle soup. Now, I'm quite a capable gamer now, but when I was little, I had the hand-eye coordination of a gerbil. So my first attempt obviously landed me in the pit of death. And so did the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. I had one more life, one more chance to prove my quality. I took the controller, and I wiped my sweaty hands on my shirt. I took a deep breath, and immediately fell off. I thought I was done, but there was an extra life. I was on the mystical, legendary 0 life. And that means that I had one more chance. One last chance to prove I immediately fell off again. In my rage, I threw the controller down, picked it up again, and I bit down on the cord as hard as I could. And then I threw the controller down again, and then I picked it up again, and then I yanked the controller. And down the GameCube fell, almost in slow motion. It hit the ground, and the screen went black. Let me tell you about Uncontrolled Anger. It is very, very dangerous and destructive. But it can ruin more than just a GameCube. It can destroy relationships and your own life as well. And God, He doesn't take anger lightly. He wants us instead to be self-controlled because He knows that uncontrolled and reckless anger causes only destruction and pain. It says in James 1:20, a man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. What does that mean? Well, let me tell you a story about two brothers. Two brothers who ultimately had their lives destroyed by anger. And if you want to read the story yourself, you can find it in the book of Genesis in chapter 4. So, here we go. So many years ago, after Adam and Eve were banished from the Garden of Eden, Eve had a son, and she named him Cain, which means brought forth or acquired. And she said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Okay, I mean, this really isn't important to the story. I just think that it's a really weird thing to name your kid acquired. Then later, Cain got a baby brother, and his name was Abel. And they were very close, and Cain always watched over his younger brother. And even though the scriptures don't really mention it, having two older brothers myself, I'm sure that they would go on hikes together and play games together and go on all kinds of fun adventures together. But even though they were close, they had very different passions. Cain was a professional gardener, and he found his pleasure in tending to the plants and crops, and he loved all that was green and growing. While Abel, on the other hand, was a spectacular shepherd. He would take care of all the animals and watch over them. He just really had a soft spot for cute animals, as we all do. Except for crazy people. And every once in a while, they would bring a sacrifice to God. And Abel, he would bring his best sheep as a sacrifice, and Cain, he would bring his crops as a sacrifice. But here's the thing, God was more pleased with Abel's sacrifice. Now, the scriptures don't outright say why God preferred Abel's sacrifice over Cain's. Maybe Cain didn't give as generously as his younger brother, or maybe he didn't put any heart into his gift. Really, who knows? But whatever the reason, it made Cain really upset. I mean, can you blame him? But I think deep down that Cain knew why God didn't accept his sacrifice. After all, God said to Cain, "Why are you so angry and upset? If you do the right thing, your sacrifice will be accepted. But if you don't do the right thing, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." God knew that Cain was upset and frustrated, and he encouraged him to learn from this and to grow. He encouraged him not to be a slave to his chaotic emotion, but to conquer his anger and to rule over it. And this is the choice that God gives us. He's on our side. He wants us to rise above our weakness, with his help and strength, to become a conqueror. But Cain, he would hear none of it. Blinded by his burning anger, he led his younger brother Abel into the field, and he did the unthinkable. He murdered his younger brother in cold blood. God then spoke to Cain, and he said, "Where's your brother?" And Cain said, "How should I know? Am I supposed to be watching over him?" But God knew what he had done, and the ground from which his brother's blood was soaked in no longer yielded anything green for Cain. Exiled from his home, he spent the rest of his days wandering the earth, endlessly reliving his terrible mistake, unable to take back what he did. His only desire was to see his younger brother again, but it was too late. Anger, as you can see, is a very dangerous thing. And just like God gave Cain a choice, he gives us that same choice. In the end, you're the one in control of your emotions. No one or thing can make you act out in anger. It's always a choice. And if you have difficulty controlling your emotions, your anger and your frustration, like I did, then ask God for help, and he will give you the strength to overcome that obstacle, just like he offered that option to Cain. And I'm not the angry, spiteful little kid I once was. God led me through to the other side. And the good news is that there is an other side. But you must make the choice to follow God, to be molded by him, and to become the person you were created to be. And if you do this, I can say with confidence that your greatest adventure is ahead.